This episode is brought to you by Netflix. 132 rooms, 157 suspects, 1 dead body, 1 wildly eccentric detective, 1 disastrous state dinner. The Residence is a screwball whodunit series set among the eclectic staff of the world's most famous mansion, the White House, from Shondaland, with an all-star cast, including Uzo Aduba as Rye Detective Cordelia Cup. Watch The Residence, now, only on Netflix.
This episode is brought to you by 20th Century Studios' The Amateur. When his wife is murdered, Charlie Heller, the CIA's most brilliant computer analyst, must trek across the globe and use his only weapon, his intelligence, to hunt down her killers and enact revenge. Starring Academy Award winner Rami Malek and Academy Award nominee Lawrence Fishburne. The Amateur. Rated PG-13. Only in theaters April 11th.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
EDO. This series contains adult language and depictions of graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised. I need to begin this episode with a correction. The homicide inspector from San Francisco who tracked down Armando Rodriguez and, well, convinced him to give up the name of the person he got the late Barbara Pann's bracelet from, that man's name is Frank Falzon. I mispronounced it as Falzone in the previous episode because, well, to be honest, I inadvertently sprinkled a little New Jersey on it, because in print, the name reminded me of the delicious Italian dish calzone, and I mistakenly threw an E at the end of his name that doesn't exist. Honest mistake, Inspector Falzon. My apologies. Now, as far as murder police go, Falzon is a legend. He worked some of the most high-profile cases that San Francisco has ever seen during a time when that city was really struggling. And in case you found yourself feeling a bit unsure with regard to his methods, maybe even angry at his use of force, which is fair, here's a clip from an interview Falzon gave just a few years ago that might give you a little more perspective.
Jewelry stolen by the killer led Falzon across the bay to El Sobrante. That's where he tracked down the unidentified suspect's buddy, Armando Rodriguez. But when confronted inside a police car, Rodriguez didn't want to talk and challenged Falzon to fight.
And one thing I learned a long time ago, somebody's fist comes up, that's a challenge to fight. And I'm not going to take the first punch. I threw the first punch. I hit him right in the eye.
Rodriguez still wouldn't give up the name, and Falzon was done asking.
As I'm coming over the seat, he throws his arms up in an X, and he says, Richard Ramirez, man. Richard Ramirez, that's the name.
The interrogation broke the case wide open.
So, like him or not, agree with his methods or not, the fact is we're living in a reality where Falzon tuning up Armando in the back of a squad car led directly to the arrest of a criminally insane serial killer, an outcome we can all agree benefited the greater good. What we have to ask ourselves is this: how many times did Falzon use those methods that didn't pan out? The great Quentin Tarantino summed up this sentiment in his masterpiece of a crime drama, his directorial debut, Reservoir Dogs.
It's the bastard you told me about? Why you beating him?
Maybe he could tell us who the fuck set us up.
If you fucking beat this prick long enough, he'll tell you started the goddamn Chicago fire. Now that don't necessarily make it fucking so! Come on, man, think!
Yes, it's a moral conundrum that permeates the human pursuit of justice to the highest levels of government. I don't have a solid answer, and I doubt anyone else does. For our purposes, all that really matters is Falzon called the LA County Sheriff and said 6 words. Your guy's name is Richard Ramirez. Welcome back to The Devil Within, Satan's Shadow. You're listening to Episode 9, Treachery. So, quite suddenly, things shifted into high gear. LA County Sheriff's homicide detectives Salerno and Carrillo set to work to find out if this Richard Ramirez guy existed. Because there was one other piece of information that Falzon told them. According to Armando Rodriguez, Ramirez had been arrested before. If true, he'd be in the antiquated system they used, everybody used back then, and they would also have, hopefully, a fingerprint on file from a previous arrest that they could compare to the print lifted from the rearview mirror of that orange Toyota station wagon. Now, that's a lot of ifs, but they got to work. The LAPD and LA Sheriff's Department together had 8 Richard Ramirez's that had been arrested and booked into the system, complete with fingerprints, ready for analysis. So, as we all know, fingerprints are unique to each human being. There's never been a case of 2 people having the same prints, not even identical twins. The means of identifying that uniqueness, however, might surprise you. Broadly, fingerprints have 3 distinct characteristics. They're called loops, whorls, and arches. Those are the terms used to describe the different patterns made by what actually constitutes a fingerprint: friction ridges and furrows. Friction ridges are the raised lines, and the furrows are the valleys between those raised lines. Maybe you're like me and have thought for your whole life that what defines a fingerprint, how they're compared, is the pattern those loops, whorls, and arches make. I always imagined something like an art project where they have a transparency of one print and they just lay it over a comparison print and, see if they line up. Man, I really hope I'm not alone in thinking that. Anyway, I was wrong about that. The uniqueness of your fingerprint lies in those friction ridges and how they begin and end. It's these ridge characteristics, called minutiae, that allow for comparison. Specifically, do they end in a fork or a bifurcation? Or do they end abruptly? Or maybe do they end gradually? Each friction ridge has a unique ending, allowing for several points of comparison on each print, which makes the final step, verification, an exact science. Exact enough to send people to death row. But before verification, there are other established steps. Briefly, it's called ACE-V, which stands for Analysis, Comparison, Evaluation, and then Verification. ACE-V. And there are, again broadly, 3 different types of fingerprints that can be collected. Prints found on soft surfaces like soap, wax, or wet paint are called 3-dimensional prints for obvious reasons. Then there are prints on hard surfaces that are either visible, referred to as patent, or invisible, called latent. Patent prints are formed when a substance like blood or ink or dirt gets transferred from the finger onto a hard surface and the print's left behind. Latent prints form when oils and sweat from your skin are deposited onto a hard surface. Patent prints are collected with high-resolution photography, while latent prints require some sort of dust to adhere to the print, which is then collected using clear adhesive tape. We've all seen the movies. Other interesting ways to collect latent prints include the use of superglue fumes. I bet right now, many of you can conjure a memory of exactly what that stuff smells like, right? So those fumes actually are attracted to and will land on the oils and other organic material in a latent print, which then allows forensic specialists to collect the fingerprint. So back in Los Angeles, the forensics lab got to work comparing the Toyota fingerprint with the 8 Richard Ramirez's on file. And they got a perfect match. Richard Ramirez, 25-year-old drifter from El Paso, Texas, arrested for car theft and various drug charges. And they even had a mugshot. The decision was made to go public. A press conference was held. The name Richard Ramirez was released as the man wanted in connection with the Night Stalker slangs, and then the mugshot was released as well. The sheriff made a simple statement. We know who you are, and soon everyone else will. There will be no place for you to hide.
Through a series of investigative leads, we have identified the Night Stalker as Richard Ramirez, also known as Ricardo Ramirez. He is a Latin male, brown eyes, black hair, 6'1", 150 pounds, originally from El Paso, Texas, who has recently been active in the Los Angeles area.
People could literally put a face to their fears, and they knew what they should be afraid of now if they saw it coming near them. Plus, in a city this big, to have your picture out there, if you're not leaving town, you're going to be seen.
The bad thing was he was still out there, and you didn't know if he was going to hit again. And so you were still scared, but at least you knew who your enemy was.
I remember telling my girlfriend at the time, I said, either he's watching this press conference right now and he's going to flee the city, or he doesn't know what's going on. Somebody's going to spot him within 24 hours and they will arrest him.
So where was Richard Ramirez as the walls were closing in on him? He decided to hop on a Greyhound bus to Arizona to see his brother. But that decision was made before the cops made the positive fingerprint ID, so Ramirez was able to get out of town without any trouble. Getting back would be a different story. The date was August 30th, 1985. The bus ride from LA to Phoenix is roughly a 7 or 8 hour trip. But when Ramirez arrived, he found out that his brother was out of town and would be for a while. So he went back to the bus station and waited for a return trip. The midnight bus to Los Angeles. On the morning of August 31st, 1985, Richard Ramirez arrived at the Union Station Greyhound Terminal in downtown LA. When he entered the lobby, he noticed a bunch of cops stationed at the entrances. I say the entrances because they weren't watching who exited. They assumed that Ramirez would be trying to get out of town. They never thought he'd already left and would be returning. Now remember, Ramirez was still in the dark as to the latest developments. He had no idea that he had been identified or that his picture was all over the news. It was just his instinct to avoid law enforcement whenever he could, especially with the police sketches that were available. So Ramirez nonchalantly walked out of the terminal, didn't make eye contact with any cops, and disappeared into the chaos of the downtown city streets. He was hungry, and just across the street was a convenience store he knew well. He popped in to grab a snack, but what he found instead would terrify him. Right there in front of him, front page above the fold, on every single newspaper in the store was a picture of him, with the headline, Night Stalker Identified. The journey had been long. It had wound through shadows and silence, through the cries of the forsaken and the whispers of those who could no longer find their voices. Dante, the Florentine poet, and Virgil, his Roman guide, had descended deeper and deeper, past the torments of the lustful, the gluttonous, the violent, and the fraudulent. Now, at the edge of the abyss, the final descent stretched before them. A pit of ice and despair, where the air itself seemed frozen in its stillness. Here was the 9th circle of hell, a plain of ice so vast it disappeared into the shadows beyond sight. It was a place not of fire and brimstone, but of relentless, unyielding cold, where even time itself seemed to freeze. The damned lay trapped beneath the ice, some partially visible, their mouths open in eternal screams, others entombed completely, their very identities lost in the frost. Dante, though he had steeled himself through the horrors of the circles above, shivered, not merely from the cold, but from something deeper, more profound. He turned to Virgil, whose form, ever sturdy, seemed unmoved by the frozen expanse before them. "What treachery is this?" Dante asked, his breath forming a mist that hung in the stagnant air. To suffer in silence beneath this ice without even the ability to wail? Virgil cast his face in the dim glow of the eternal gloom and nodded toward the figures before them. These are the traitors, Dante. Those who betrayed kin, country, guests, and lords. Their sin is not one of passion, but of calculation, of coldness, and thus the punishment fits. They are locked in a prison of their own making. They sought to destroy with silence and deception, and now silence and isolation are their eternal fate. Dante moved carefully forward, his sandals scraping against the slick surface of the ice. He peered down, his poet's mind unable to resist shaping verses for what he saw. A man's face, only his nose and eyes visible above the ice, gazed up, unblinking. The eyes, wide and filled with an anguish beyond words, flickered with the remnants of human suffering, though no breath came from his lips. Virgil gestured ahead to where the ice seemed to rise in jagged peaks, forming a vast frozen wasteland. And there, he said, at the very center, lies the greatest traitor of them all. Dante followed Virgil's outstretched hand, and in the distance he saw it. A form so colossal that for a moment the poet believed it to be a mountain of ice. But then, as his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he realized the truth. A shape, monstrous and terrifying, was encased in the ice from the waist down, its massive form stretching toward the cavern's vaulted ceiling. Wings, like those of a vast and corrupted bat, spread out but didn't flap. Instead, they stood rigid, frozen in place. And yet from them emanated the terrible wind that kept the ice unbroken, that froze the traitors into their eternal stasis. Lucifer. Dante swallowed, his throat dry despite the icy air. He had known of the devil's presence in the lowest depths of hell, but the reality of it, of him, was something altogether different. The fallen angel's three faces, each grotesque in its aspect, glared outward, their mouths locked in ceaseless motion, each chewing on a damned soul. Judas Iscariot, Brutus, Cassius. Betrayers of the highest order, consumed and reconsumed in an endless cycle of suffering. Dante couldn't look away. There was something paradoxically enthralling about Lucifer, not the great and fiery rebel of human imagination, but this tormented, pathetic wretch whose punishment was his own perpetual imprisonment. Virgil's voice was low but steady. This is the ultimate consequence of treachery. It leads not to power or dominion, but to this: stagnation, immobility, eternal ruin. Lucifer betrayed the highest love, and now he is denied all warmth, all motion, and all hope. He does not rule here. He is merely another prisoner. Dante, his mind swirling with the weight of what he had witnessed, took a deep breath. His journey through hell was nearly complete, and yet standing here before the ruined majesty of the devil himself, he felt no triumph, only understanding. There was a path forward, beyond the ice, beyond the pit. He could see it now. The narrow passage that would lead them away from this frozen abyss and into the unknown. Virgil turned to him. "Come, Dante. We must go on."
Subtle results, still you, but with fewer lines. Botox Cosmetic, out of botulinum toxin A, is a prescription medicine used to temporarily make moderate to severe frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better in adults.
Effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Don't receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow and eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Tell your doctor about medical history, muscle or nerve conditions including ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. For full safety information, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.
Still getting around to that fix on your car? You got this. On eBay, you'll find millions of parts guaranteed to fit. Doesn't matter if it's a major engine repair or your first time swapping your windshield wipers. eBay has that part you need, ready to click perfectly into place for changes big and small. Loud or quiet, find all the parts you need at prices you'll love. Guaranteed to fit every time. But you already know that. eBay. Things, people, love. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
Good night, itchy eyes. Good night, sudden sneeze. Good night to your symptoms of allergies. Zysol is the allergy medicine you take before bed. It provides powerful relief while you rest your head. Not just all night, but all the next day. Zysol keeps working, keeping allergies at bay. And without those annoying symptoms disturbing your rest, you can wake up the next morning feeling your absolute best. Remember, be wise all. Take Zysol. At night.
We off? 30 seconds of carefree bliss. Oof, like wind in your hair carefree. Oh, like using Clorox Disinfecting All-Purpose Cleaner in the home carefree. Yes! Like dog slobbing on the coffee table and cleaning it with Clorox Carefree? He's on a roll now. Spit toothpaste on the faucet. You got it. You got it. Peanut butter on the light switch. Oh, spritz, spritz. Spritz, spritz. Clorox, man. Clean feels good.
Okay, we're back. Use as directed.
He saw his picture on the newspaper and didn't say, oh my God, because he doesn't like that, but said, Satan help me, feet don't fail me now, and he knew he had been had.
Now Richard Ramirez was running for his life, and he knew it. He needed to get away, and fast. So he decided to get on a city bus. Now, like most people, I've developed a semi-serious addiction to my phone. I kind of beat myself up over it, and I'm not even on any social media. I've never posted anything about my life in my life. Still, it's where I get my information. My phone is my primary news source. Then something curious happened during my research for this series, and I kind of feel way better about myself. Next time you're on a bus or a subway, maybe waiting to board a plane, and you look around disgusted at every single person looking down at their phones, and you fear for the future of humanity. Do a quick Google image search for any of those public transit locations at any time before, say, the year 2000. What's everyone doing? They're all looking down at what? The daily newspaper. It's not just us people. It's how it's been since information was available on a large scale for a low price. People have a desire to know what's going on in the world. So go easy on yourself. But also put your phone down in a restaurant, or if your kid wants your attention. You know, the obvious stuff. The reason I bring this up is that Ramirez made a huge mistake by getting on a city bus early in the morning of August 31st, 1985. Why? Everyone was reading the morning paper, and because of that, everyone knew who the Night Stalker was and what he looked like. Imagine Ramirez getting on that bus and maybe being relieved that no one bothered to look up at him, but at the same time, paralyzed with fear because he was surrounded by pictures of himself on the front page of every paper the passengers were holding. So it took about 10 minutes before someone started pointing and murmuring, and then, within moments, everyone was looking in his direction.
He was recognized by the citizens, and then the chase was on. And they were pointing to him, it's him, it's him.
They knew. Ramirez knew they knew and sprinted off the bus at the next stop before anyone could do anything about it. But still, concerned citizens also got off and made a phone call to 911 that they had just spotted the Night Stalker on a bus in Boyle Heights and that he took off running across the freeway in the direction of the neighborhood of East Los Angeles. The neighborhood of East LA holds tremendous cultural significance in the history of the city. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, railroad construction and manufacturing development created tremendous job opportunities, and the community grew into a vibrant, mostly immigrant community made of Mexican and Mexican Americans. The neighborhood soon took on a distinct identity, very close-knit, strong emphasis on family, with cultural influences from Mexico blending with American traditions. This only grew in the 40s and 50s, as the post-World War II Los Angeles saw many of their returning Mexican-American veterans settle in East LA. By the 60s and 70s, the neighborhood became ground zero for the Chicano movement that sought to address civil rights issues, with activists like Cesar Chavez rising to prominence. By the 1980s, despite a significant gang problem, East LA felt, to many who lived there, like it was one joyous, extended family. Block after block, you could count on your neighbor. This was the environment Richard Ramirez had the misfortune to find himself in on the morning of August 31st. After fleeing the city bus and somehow surviving a run across 14 lanes of freeway traffic, Ramirez kept running for more than 2 miles until he stopped to catch his breath on Hubbard Street at the corner of Dittman Avenue in East Los Angeles. I imagine him telling himself, "The hell are you running for? You're a car thief, dude. Get yourself some wheels and get the hell out of the city." So, a Latino man walking down Hubbard Street was not out of place or cause for any type of alarm. It was still kind of early, before 10 a.m., but it was a Saturday, so there were people around, probably trying to figure out how to stay cool on a day that was expected to hit 110 in the city. Ramirez calmed himself, tried to act normal, cool off, but he kept his eyes peeled for a possible car, and soon he spotted a red '66 Ford Mustang in a driveway on Hubbard Street. Ramirez walked up the driveway, opened the door, and got in. What he didn't know was that the owner of the vehicle, Faustino Piñon, was underneath the car working on it, about to change the oil. Faustino and his friend Jose pulled Ramirez out of the car and tried to hold him, but Ramirez broke free and ran away.
Keep in mind, Mr. Ramirez at that point had operated at night, one-on-one with his victims. Now all of a sudden it's broad daylight and he's trying to steal a car in East Los Angeles. The thing about East Los Angeles, it's a very insular neighborhood. It's very tight. The people on the blocks know each other. And if someone tries to victimize someone in that neighborhood, odds are it isn't just going to be one person who you're going to be dealing with, it's going to be the whole neighborhood.
And that is exactly what Ramirez ran into. Seconds later, he was back on Hubbard Street and thought he must have hit the jackpot because he saw a woman, later identified as Angelina De La Torre, just getting into her car. Ramirez ran up to her, forced the door open, and began dragging her out in hopes of just hopping in and speeding away. But Angelina put up just enough of a fight while screaming for help that her husband, Manuel, had time to grab a weapon, a steel pipe, and bash Ramirez over the head as he tried to flee, because it wasn't just Manuel. Within moments, it was Faustino, Jose, their sons, and almost half of the rest of the block that gave chase after Manuel connected twice with the steel pipe to Ramirez's head. He didn't get far. The neighbors didn't stomp Ramirez to death. In fact, they probably didn't even realize they'd captured the Night Stalker until much later when the police arrived. They just assumed he was some drugged-out interloper looking for a quick score on a stolen car. Detective Carrillo had an interesting perspective on what might have happened if the local gangs had been on Hubbard Street that morning, and not the law-abiding citizens.
Had the gang members caught him, there's no doubt in my mind his case would have been adjudicated right then and there without an appeal.
But when the neighborhood did realize they had captured one of the worst serial killers in U.S. history, it was cause for celebration.
Among the hundreds gathered outside the police station, there's an almost carnival-like atmosphere of celebration. Not only excitement, but also relief.
I was in a hair salon at the time, and everybody in the salon got up and cheered. Everybody was relieved that had happened. I mean, it was a momentous morning.
When we found out this guy had been caught, we had the TV on. We wanted to have a party. We were so happy he was caught.
Earlier today, the residents here on Hubbard Street were filled with fear. Not anymore. Now the streets are filled with excitement.
What's going on tonight? Well, house party, man. What do you expect? We got that turkey.
We had a big block party, to be honest with you.
Just the relief to know that this person was caught and actually, physically harmed. I don't know. As creepy as it may sound, I was happy for that.
Hubbard Street turned into a party as they and the rest of the city celebrated the end of an 18-month nightmare that resulted in 14 deaths, 11 violent sexual assaults, and an unknown number of child abductions. Ramirez, upon his arrest, told the officers who saved his life from the citizens of East L.A., "You're lucky. You got me." Early indications from the day of his arrest gave investigators hope that Ramirez would be willing to talk, but that hope was premature. As soon as the cameras were off and Ramirez was in a holding cell downtown, he stopped talking. But there were others who were about to start talking, namely his fences. Armando Rodriguez, his friend in San Francisco who had already betrayed Ramirez once, was offered a deal to give up everything he knew, and police soon discovered it wasn't so much what Armando knew as it was what he had. And that was hundreds of items that Ramirez had stolen from the homes of his many victims. Apparently, these were the items that his fence in LA couldn't do anything with, so Armando was holding on to them up in San Francisco. Every item was fingerprinted and identified through interviews with the victims' families, and Ramirez's prints were found on every single one. The trial of the Night Stalker would prove to be a spectacle unlike Los Angeles or the nation had ever seen, for a host of reasons. That trial, the aftermath, and the eventual fate of Richard Ramirez will be covered in a series of bonus episodes starting next week. For now, the City of Angels' time in hell was over. Her latest enemy had been vanquished, but not without paying a terrible price. It was a chance for everyone to take a beat, for the city to catch her breath, and for the entire community to ready itself for the long and difficult process of atonement. Not through prayer or sacrifice, but through the justice system, where Richard Ramirez would face a jury of his peers. At the threshold of the infernal abyss, Dante felt the weight of his journey pressing upon him, an exhaustion deeper than flesh, heavier than soul. The horrors of hell had carved themselves into his memory, the wailing shades of the damned, the fetid winds that carried the cries of sinners, the burning sands, the monstrous forms of demons whose very existence was torment personified. And yet, before him, rising from the heart of darkness, stood the narrow path of escape. A journey not into safety, but into yet another trial of endurance. The passage from darkness into dawn. Virgil, ever steady, ever composed, placed a guiding hand on Dante's shoulder. "We must press on," he said, his voice carrying neither weariness or hesitation. "The world above awaits." Their ascent was no simple climb, but an arduous struggle against gravity and the remnants of despair that clung to them like soot from an endless fire. At the very core of the inferno, where Lucifer lay half buried in ice, Virgil had shown Dante the ultimate paradox, that the Prince of Darkness, in his eternal struggle, had himself become the instrument of their escape. By descending fully into the abyss, they had reached the point where down became up, where the natural order of things was reversed. Hand over hand, foot over foot, they climbed, their muscles screaming in defiance. The tunnel, cut through ancient rock, was rough and uneven, as if it had been carved by some forgotten cataclysm, a reminder that even in the foundations of the world, chaos had once ruled. The air grew less oppressive, the heat of the abyss giving way to a cool, damp breath of earth, a promise that the mortal world was near. Dante's limbs trembled as he pulled himself over the final ledge, collapsing onto solid ground. He gasped, lungs desperate for the freshness of air that did not carry the reek of sulfur and sin. The stars, veiled for so long by the suffocating gloom of hell, shone above him, distant yet welcoming, a constellation of mercy for the weary traveler. He lay there for a moment, absorbing the silence, the lack of screams, the absence of judgment. Virgil stood beside him, his expression unreadable, though perhaps tinged with satisfaction. "We must soon part ways, my friend," he said, his voice almost wistful. "Your path now turns to a higher calling." Dante, still catching his breath, turned toward the rising land ahead. The journey was not yet over. Purgatory loomed before him, and beyond that, the celestial heights of paradise. But for the first time since his descent into the inferno, hope stirred within him, faint yet undeniable. With the last shadows of hell behind them, they rose to their feet. The night sky stretched above, vast and infinite, a tapestry of promise. And with measured steps, Dante and his guide left behind the underworld, walking toward the dawn of redemption. Thanks for listening to The Devil Within, Satan's Shadow. Coming up next week, the beginning of the bonus episodes, starting with the trial of Richard Ramirez and Dante's journey through purgatory. That's next week on The Devil Within.